The Doom franchise is my favourite lineup of shooters of all time. I come back to it with open arms, knowing that there's always a good time to be had. Whether it's the classic Doom games, Doom 3 or 2016 and Eternal, the series for the most part has been amazing at best and solid at worst. Even the Black Sheep, Doom 3 is still a great game with fun gameplay, tense atmosphere, great enemy designs, and modding capabilities. The latest titles have revamped and brought it back to its roots, starting with 2016, which not only brought Doom back, but was the game that helped kickstart the boomer shooter genre as we know it, following with two heavy hitters like Dusk and Ultra Kill, which I think are still the best boomer shooters ever made. But what Doom's strength has always been known for is the overall single player experience. Its gameplay is fun and addictive. The premise is iconic as well as the character himself, but all of the magic seems to have stemmed from the strong foundations of the single player campaigns and their great gameplay, and as well as the iconic setting itself. Whereas Quake, on the other hand, would be iconic for its multiplayer experience that would allow for Team Fortress to be born, as well as directly inspiring Half-Life that would lead to other great franchises being made. Doom had the single player and Quake had the multiplayer. That's how I've always differentiated these games, where one had excelled at one thing over the other. But that doesn't mean that Doom didn't have good multiplayer. In fact, Romero would coin the term deathmatch and had wanted to make a mode where other people could verse each other, or even co-op in the levels themselves. From the very beginning, multiplayer was in mind for the franchise, but its single player counterpart would always outshine it. But thanks to the presence of its huge modding community, people have been able to enjoy multiplayer alongside the usage of other mods like Complex Doom, Brutal Doom, Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch, and the recent floppy disk mod made by Broleg alongside other people in the project. It's an untapped realm that's often overlooked by a lot of people because the general conception of Doom for a long time is that it's been primarily a single player game. But some of the stuff I've seen in the modding community, especially with the Quake Champions conversion mod and the recent Halo Doom mod, I'm convinced that Doom can potentially have some of the best multiplayer available today. Traditionally, the classic Doom games have just had deathmatch and some co-op, where players would pit against each other and get frags, and in co-op, people would play in levels together. It was multiplayer at its purest at the time, simple and to the point. The fast-paced movement is made even more apparent when you see other players going at the same kind of speeds. You'd find items, pick up weapons, setting the foundations that Quake would pick up on later. On its own, the experience was fun for its time, but understandably, it wouldn't have the same impact as its single player, which a lot of people gravitated towards. What's kept it alive though are the existence of source ports, making old games viable to play on modern systems, the most notable examples being GZ Doom and Zandronum. There are plenty of them, and some like Chocolate Doom and Boom try to replicate the experience as it was in the 90s. But for multiplayer, ports like Z-Demon and Zandronum were what people would use to play online. The combination of Zandronum and Doom Explorer enables access to existing servers, where people can not only find matches, but also download all the necessary files in order to play them. Nowadays though, the servers just have a lot of bots in it, and it depends on what time of the day you play. Some hours it's more active, and other hours not so much. But you can usually find players engaging in last man standing matches or co-op sessions. You can also host your own server or join other Discord communities that organize matches within Doom's multiplayer scene. Playing Complex Doom is pretty insane with other people, especially when you're playing it for the first time or any other game. But if you can find the right people or get a herd together, it can be a lot of fun. Some of them have bots, and while they're not the best in terms of emulating the overall experience in multiplayer, you'll still get a kick out of them nonetheless. The Quake Champions and Halo conversion mods are really fun to play, and even in spite of the limited nature of Doom's engine, modern source ports show what is possible with such an old game. Even with all this going on in the background, Doom is still considered a single player game, and it's still something that I agree with, to be honest. But the multiplayer experience itself is something that's always been there, and I think it deserves a lot more love considering how moddable the classic Doom games are and how much multiplayer variety there can potentially be. The very thing that kept the classic Doom games for so long, as I've already said, is the modding scene, and it's the main reason why so many people still play it and make content for the game. Not a lot of shooters can say the same, not to mention the ability to publish your own games within GZ Doom that you could even sell. It would be cool to see more multiplayer conversion mods, but like anything, it's only a matter of time until that happens. Now, the main focus of the video has been on the classic Doom multiplayer scene, since that's where I believe it's at its strongest. But the other Doom entries have had their own side of multiplayer to share. Doom 3's multiplayer doesn't have much of a pulse nowadays, but like classic Doom, it does have its own modding scene, from graphical and gameplay overhauls weapon skins and add-ons, modifiers, new maps, and total conversion mods. But again, it's mainly a single player game. You have your deathmatch, your team deathmatch, your last man standing, and a tournament 1v1 mode. In terms of movement, it can be fairly fast paced like Quake, and you can also hop around and rocket jump if you want to. The bigger problem mainly is finding people to play with. It's a game that I hold dearly and have a lot of memories with, but the multiplayer unfortunately is something that I've yet to fully appreciate and haven't really played a lot of. In saying that though, if you like the game already and can find people that are interested in Doom 3 multiplayer, then definitely check it out. Doom 2016's multiplayer on the other hand is underrated. Already having the fantastic movement and fast-paced gameplay from the single player, including some extra weapons into the mix, it's pretty similar to Quake with power-ups, power weapons, and items scattered around the arena. Eventually though, people would lose interest in that part of the game and just enjoy the single player or the co-op based content that you can find within the snap map. The modding scene is incredibly limited that there's only a handful of mods that you can find, but the snap map has a good range of handmade content that caters to different modes. The loadouts may be a deal breaker for some, but the gameplay that's still there is still good, and I honestly enjoy it more than Battlemode, which is, to be honest, something that I've never really got into. It's always been the one part of Doom Eternal that I ignored, and I tried a few matches and it just wasn't really clicking with me in the same way it did for 2016's multiplayer, and unfortunately, Battlemode is all there is for any multiplayer experience in Doom Eternal. The previous games went for a traditional multiplayer system with enough legroom for players to create content around it and even create new game modes. Just look at what Classic Doom has achieved in the past 3 decades alone just from its own community. It's a shame that the recent Doom entries can't replicate that in the same way that the Classic Doom games can. And while I love the recent Doom games, the multiplayer potential seems to be brewing in the classics. At the end of the day, Doom is whatever you want it to be, and you can play it however you want. But while one camp has flourished, the other is underappreciated and more often than not, overlooked. I've even given it the same impression that it was strictly a single player game and that the multiplayer is something to ignore. And while I still stand by the fact that Doom is primarily a single player game, recent experiences and discovering its multiplayer community have made me think otherwise now, where it still is mainly a single player game, but it also has some fantastic multiplayer games that people just aren't really playing much of. And an already good game with multiplayer added is like icing on the cake and opens up new communities should it be successful enough and looked after well enough. Classic Doom has already been shaped in so many ways that the game can last forever pretty much. It's one of the few games that I've put hundreds and hundreds of hours into, more so than most shooters because of how much there is to play and the range of mods available. Its multiplayer is something with a lot of untapped potential and it can make for insane moments. In some servers like the floppy disk mod, creating the same kind of chaos and fun that you can see in other games like Jabroni Brawl, Gary's Mod, Sven Co-op, except that Classic Doom specifically has 3 decades worth of content behind its back that multiple people can enjoy at the same time. I would encourage people to look more into the multiplayer scene for the Classic Doom games, or even boot up the multiplayer for Doom 3 and Doom 2016 if you want a more traditional Quake-like experience, or something in the vein of 2000s FPS multiplayer anyways. But in the case of Classic Doom, all you have to do to get started is download Xandronum, which should come included with Doom Seeker, which is what will allow you to host or join ongoing matches. Funny enough though, Quake's single player, the first one specifically, is pretty good, but it's not as good as Doom. But on the account of modding though, I'd say that the gap comes a lot closer in the single player department, where there are some amazing single player conversion mods or content within Quake 1. For example, you can see Arcane Dimensions, which is a map pack for Quake and is what the main campaign should have been. Or Slayer's Testaments, which is a remake of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, but within Quake 1. And like I already mentioned, the first Quake gave birth to Team Fortress, which would become one of the most iconic franchises in FPS history, thanks to TF2. Quake has the potential for better single player content, and Doom has the potential for more multiplayer content and a bigger multiplayer community. And more people should be encouraged to check it out and see that Doom has more to offer than just a single player. Thank you for watching.
Wow.